The ability to have somebody who is kind of epitomizes what you think your country stands for has always been a major ambition.
It was supposed to be just another peaceful day at Balmoral Castle, a day without cameras, reporters, or royal duties. The royal family had gathered for a simple picnic on the large green estate. It wasn't about being kings or queens that day, it was about being family. The picnic blankets were spread neatly across the grass, the baskets were full of homemade pastries, fruit, and cold sandwiches. Children ran around without shoes, laughing freely, while the adults relaxed in simple clothing, sipping warm tea, and enjoying the fresh Scottish air. There were no speeches, no ceremonies, only laughter, stories, and love. Princess Charlotte, just 9 years old, was among those children. She sat comfortably inside a small tent with her brothers and cousins. They were playing cards, sipping cocoa, and enjoying their own little world far away from rules and expectations. Charlotte wasn't a princess in that moment. She was just a young girl with messy hair, wearing a cozy cardigan and socks, completely at ease. Her laughter echoed softly through the tent as she enjoyed time with her loved ones. Everyone seemed relaxed until Queen Camilla walked in too. The tent, she wasn't wearing her crown or any grand outfit, but her presence was strong. She quietly nodded at the adults and slowly looked around the tent. Her eyes finally landed on Charlotte. The little girl sat cross-legged on the floor with her cocoa nearby, holding her playing cards and smiling with joy. Camilla's expression changed slightly.
Nice.
She calmly walked over the rug and stood near Charlotte.
But
She said gently, "That's not how a future queen should sit." Charlotte looked up puzzled. "We're just playing a game," she replied softly. But Camilla continued speaking in a way that didn't feel very kind. She said, "Little ladies, especially future queens, should always sit properly."
how much?
Charlotte quickly sat up straighter, unsure of what she had done wrong. The room became quiet.
Us.
The children felt it, but no one spoke. Then came the sentence that changed the whole mood. Camilla said, "It's sweet how your mother lets you behave so casually, just like Diana did, and we all saw how that ended."
House.
One wrote a book, the other ran away. Charlotte blinked, confused and hurt. Her smile was gone now. Camilla kept talking. "You'll understand one day. The world doesn't care if you're having fun, it only cares how you look." George looked up from his game, eyes narrowing, but still said nothing. The children didn't know how to react. Then Camilla added, "Your mother means well, but she forgets. She's not queen, I am, and the way she's raising you, it's a mistake waiting to happen." Silence filled the tent. It wasn't just awkward silence. It was the kind of silence that feels heavy, like something important just broke. Hands stopped moving. Her face showed confusion and sadness. She looked down at her cocoa and her cards, unsure of how to return to play. She softly whispered, "What did I do wrong? What did Mum do wrong?" But Camilla didn't soften. She simply said, "That's the problem. You don't even know. This family fills your head with the idea that you're special, but you're not. You'll just be married off one day. That's all." Then she turned and walked out of the tent without looking back. As Queen Camilla left the tent, she returned to where King Charles stood, calmly looking at the sky, unaware of what had just happened. Camilla walked over to him with a soft smile. On her face, like nothing had happened. She adjusted her dress and quietly spoke to him. But behind her, inside that tent, the atmosphere had completely changed. Charlotte stood still for a moment, her eyes wide, her hands holding the cards close to her chest. Her cocoa sat untouched on the ground. The laughter was gone. She slowly stood up, not crying, but clearly holding something heavy in her little heart. And then she did something surprising. She didn't walk toward her mother, Kate Middleton, or even her father, Prince William. Instead, she walked straight to Princess Anne. Princess Anne, known by many as the royal family's strongest member, had always been calm, focused, and protective of the children. She didn't care for headlines or gossip. She didn't play royal games. But she always showed up when it mattered. Charlotte reached Anne, her small fingers wrapping tightly around Anne's hand. Aunt looked down and saw immediately that something was wrong. Charlotte's cheeks were red, her lips were trembling, and her body was trying hard not to cry. Anne knelt slowly, calmly, and whispered, "What happened, love?" Charlotte's voice was barely a whisper. She said I wasn't special, she said softly, that Mum's raising me wrong, that I'll be married off to someone like I don't matter. Anne stayed still. Her face didn't change, but her posture did. Her eyes followed Charlotte's gaze to the edge of the tent. No words were needed. Anne knew who said it. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened. At the Queen's funeral, Camilla had whispered something unpleasant to Charlotte, something cruel. Family had ignored it then, thinking it was just grief or stress. But not this time. Not during a picnic. Not when the children were just being children. Anne slowly stood, calm and composed. But inside, she was strong and ready. She looked around the tent, and then, with a voice low enough to remain private but firm enough to be heard, she said, "No child in this family will ever be spoken to like that, not while I'm still breathing." The entire tent froze, even. Those outside paused. Camilla, now a few steps away, turned slightly, but Anne didn't stop. She turned back to Charlotte, knelt again, and brushed a strand of hair away from her face. Then she whispered something in her ear, something no one else could hear. But whatever it was, it made Charlotte smile, just barely. That smile, as small as it was, said everything. It was a reminder that she was safe, seen, and loved. Anne stood up again and walked straight toward Camilla. This time her voice was calm but full of emotion. "We've seen what happens when little girls in this family are made to feel small. I won't let that happen again." There was no shouting, no big drama. But those words were louder than anything else that had been said all day. Camilla didn't respond. She stayed silent, standing still in place. Anne didn't wait for her to reply. She took Charlotte by the hand and walked her across the grass back to Kate. Kate saw them coming and immediately reached for her daughter. Pulling her close, Charlotte hugged her tightly. No tears, no words. Just that long, quiet hug between a mother and her child. Anne looked at William and nodded. Nothing more was needed. Everyone now knew what had happened. Everyone understood. And though no one would speak of it in public, something had changed forever that day. Line had been drawn, one that no one would cross again. Ned spoken not just for Charlotte, but for every royal child who had ever been made to feel like they were less than they are. From that day forward, things were different within the royal family. There were no official statements, no public responses, but everyone who had been at Balmoral that day remembered what had happened. Princess Anne had done what few expected. She stood up not just as a royal, but as an aunt, a protector, and someone who wouldn't let silence win. Charlotte felt the strength of her words. Perhaps more importantly, she felt that she mattered, not because of her title, not because of her role in the line of succession, but because she was Charlotte, a kind, thoughtful, and bright little girl who deserved respect, love, and care like any child. For many, the royal family can feel like a cold and distant world. But moments like these remind us that behind the crowns and palaces are real people, real children, and real emotions. What Anne did that day was not about power. It was about love. Quiet, powerful love that refuses to stay silent when someone small is hurt. And while the world may never see these moments play out on TV or in newspapers, they live on in the quiet strength of those who choose to do what's right, even when no one's watching. It was a sunny afternoon at the royal estate. The family had gathered for what was supposed to be a peaceful picnic. Children laughed, played, and ran across the lawn while adults chatted under tents and trees. Princess Kate sat under a tree, quietly watching her children from a distance. Looked calm and joyful on the outside. But in a quiet corner of the garden, something had happened, something that made Princess Anne's heart sink. She had seen it with her own eyes. Young Princess Charlotte was standing near Queen Camilla, and the look on Charlotte's face was enough to raise concern, and didn't wait or ask anyone for permission. She simply walked straight to the little girl, took her hand gently, and led her away from the group. Charlotte didn't speak, but her eyes showed she was upset. As they walked across the lawn, Anne stayed calm, offering silent comfort just by being there. When they reached Kate, the princess stood up at once, worry flooding her face. Anne leaned in and whispered everything that had happened. Kate listened closely. She didn't interrupt, and she didn't ask questions. She just opened her arms and hugged Charlotte tightly. The little girl wrapped both arms around her mother's waist and wouldn't let go. Anne rested her hand on Charlotte's, back for a brief moment, showing support, then stepped back. There was nothing more to say. The message had been delivered. The truth was out. Anne turned and walked toward the tent again, heading back toward the rest of the family. Just before she reached it, she paused, quietly wiping away a tear from her cheek. No one noticed, but in that moment, everything began to change. Anne didn't return to her seat or pretend nothing happened. Instead, she made her way toward King Charles, who stood near the rose garden with Camilla by his side. "We're having a quiet conversation," completely unaware that their peaceful day was about to be disrupted. Anne didn't wait for them to stop talking. She walked straight up and said firmly, "Charles, we need to talk." Camilla's smile faded quickly. Anne then turned to a nearby palace staff member and said, "Get me William." The order was followed immediately. A few minutes later, Prince William arrived. He took one look at Anne and instantly knew something serious had happened. Without a word to Camilla, Anne led William and Charles a few steps away from everyone else. The three stood in a tight circle on the lawn, with the warm afternoon suddenly feeling cold. Anne took a deep breath and told them everything what Camilla had said to Charlotte, how the child reacted, and why it was unacceptable. William listened. Without saying a word, his jaw tense. Charles also stayed silent until Anne finished. Finally, he spoke, trying to calm the situation. "Camilla wasn't being cruel," he said. "She was just trying to teach Charlotte something." Anne's eyes narrowed. "Teach her what?" she asked sharply. "That she's just a piece to be traded in marriage, that she doesn't matter." Charles stayed calm, replying, "She's being prepared for a tough life. It's not always gentle." Anne shook her head. "It wasn't preparation," she said. "That was humiliation. She was only 9. Charles admitted that the tone might have been too much, but insisted that the message teaching self-awareness and discipline was part of being royal. He said it was expected by Queen Elizabeth of all her children and grandchildren. William stood still, not saying a word, but the tension in his body showed he was deeply affected. Then Anne stepped closer and lowered her voice. "Let me make this clear," she said. "No child in this family will be treated like that, not while I'm still breathing." Charles looked away, offering no argument. William remained silent, but he didn't need to speak. Everyone in that moment understood the message. From that point on, there were no more discussions, no more debates. The royal family picnic ended quietly. No announcements were made. The tents were packed up, tables folded, and staff instructed to clear everything. The laughter had disappeared. No one asked what had happened, but everyone sensed the mood had changed. And when the family returned to the castle that evening, it wasn't the same home they had left that morning. Back inside the castle, a heavy silence settled over the halls. The children walked more slowly, sensing that something had shifted. Princess Charlotte stayed close to Kate, tightly holding her mother's hand. William followed behind them, watching his family closely. He had a lot on his mind. The hallway, which usually echoed with laughter and chatter, felt unusually quiet. After the children were dressed in their pajamas and tucked into bed, William didn't follow. Instead, he stayed in the sitting room, pacing back and forth. Kate remained nearby, silent but concerned. William didn't raise his voice. He didn't break anything or shout. His anger wasn't loud. It was cold, deep, and controlled. Finally, after several minutes of walking in circles, he stopped and said, "I'm done pretending." He didn't need to say more. Kate understood exactly who he meant. Moments later, William called the children back downstairs. George, Charlotte, and Louis appeared in their pajamas, confused as to why they were being called so late. William sat them down on the couch and looked at them carefully. He didn't kneel like he usually did when speaking to them. This time, he stayed standing, serious and strong. "I want you to always be kind," he began. "Always be respectful. But if anyone ever treats you like you don't matter, you do not stay silent. Not even in this family." The children looked at each other. Charlotte stared at the floor. William continued. From now on, you don't have to call Camilla grandmother. Be respectful. But your grandmother was. Diana? That's the only name you need to know. Charlotte's eyes lifted slightly. George nodded. William leaned in and said softly, Don't let anyone tell you that you are small or unimportant. No matter how old they are or what title they have, you come to me, always. The room remained silent. Then Charlotte quietly asked, Is she in trouble? William paused, then replied, She's not in trouble. But she knows what she did, and she will take responsibility. The children nodded slowly, then returned upstairs. William stood in the hallway alone for a few minutes, thinking about everything. He walked through the quiet castle until he found Princess Anne standing by a window in the east wing. She hadn't gone to sleep either. She was waiting. When William arrived, she turned slightly and looked at him, saying nothing. William broke the silence. She thinks she's untouchable, he said, staring out the window. Anne nodded. Most people who marry into royalty think that until someone shows them they're not. William shook his head. She told Charlotte she'd be married. Off like she's nothing. Like a piece to trade. And she thinks the crown lets her say that. He paused, then added firmly, Let her wait. The day I become king, I'll remind her what it really means to be part of this family. That crown she leans on, I'll take it off her head myself if I have to. And I'll make sure it stays off. Anne looked at him without surprise. She knew William had reached his limit. She's been warned, Anne replied. There won't be another chance. The next morning, things began to change. Quietly, without press releases or royal statements, Camilla began missing private family events. She didn't show up for it. George's casual birthday tea. She skipped the autumn walk the family usually took together. There were no public explanations, but the change was too obvious to ignore. Soon, rumors started spreading. Not about what happened, but about why Camilla was suddenly absent. And as expected, Camilla tried to control the story. She didn't make a public statement. Instead, sources close to her started speaking to the press, claiming that she was being pushed out unfairly. Soft headlines began to appear, saying Camilla was misunderstood and had only tried to guide the younger royals. She painted herself as the victim, trying to protect the monarchy's future. But the palace stayed silent. William didn't respond. Anne didn't speak. Even King Charles said nothing. The silence spoke louder than any official statement. And the public noticed. People could tell something serious had happened, even if they didn't know the details. Those inside the family knew exactly what had occurred, and for them, that was enough. Anne didn't just stand up for Charlotte. She set a new standard. A new rule. One that no one would dare cross again. In the end, Princess Anne's action was more than just a protective moment. It was a turning point. Her courage reminded everyone, inside and outside the palace, that some lines should never be crossed. Children, no matter their title or role, deserve respect and kindness. And when someone oversteps, no matter how high their position, they should be held accountable. Anne's quiet strength, William's silent anger, and Kate's calm support formed a shield around Charlotte that day. It was a moment of unity for those who truly cared about the next generation of royals. Camilla may have tried to shape the story in her favor, but the truth was already set. The people saw the change. The press noticed the silence. And behind the palace walls, the royals took note. Anne's tearful walk with Charlotte, William's honest words to his children. And the firm line drawn in private conversations changed everything. There were no royal announcements, but a quiet revolution had started, one that made it clear being royal doesn't give you the right to mistreat others, especially not children. Princess Charlotte will grow up remembering that someone stood up for her when she needed it most. And thanks to Anne's bravery and William's support, the future of the monarchy might just be a little kinder, a little more just, and a lot more human. In the quiet aftermath of that royal family picnic, something unshakable had shifted, not just within the palace walls, but in the hearts of those who were watching from afar. Princess Anne's brave action that day was more than a moment of protection. It was a symbol of courage, truth, and unconditional love. When she saw Princess Charlotte being treated unfairly, she didn't pause. She didn't wait for permission. She simply acted, 'cause to her, no title, no crown, and no royal duty could ever be more important than the well-being of an innocent child. And in that simple but powerful choice, Anne reminded the entire monarchy and the world that respect must begin at home. For Princess Charlotte, the day may have started with confusion and hurt, but it ended with something much greater. The comfort of her mother's arms, the quiet strength of her aunt, and the unspoken promise from her father that she would never be left unprotected. These are the moments that shape a child, not the gowns or tiaras or ceremonies, but the love that surrounds them when no one else is watching. A family known for tradition, silence, and duty, Anne's voice cut through the usual royal calm, like a rare bolt of truth. And William's response, thoughtful and filled with resolves, showed the kind of leader he may one day be, not just a king, but a father who puts his children first. Queen Camilla's actions, whether meant to teach or not, crossed a line that day. And while she may have tried to explain it away through whispers in the press and soft stories, the truth had already taken root. Her absence from family events didn't go unnoticed. Her silence didn't speak strength, it revealed distance. And while no official statement came from the palace, none was needed. The people saw what mattered. The family saw it too. Sometimes the most powerful changes don't happen with royal declarations or grand speeches. They happen in quiet moments, a hand on a child's shoulder, a tear wiped away in silence, a father telling his children the truth. Anne's actions became the first step in setting a new boundary, one that said children in this family will be protected, their voices will be heard, their worth will never be questioned. As the days moved forward, things in the royal household carried on. But a new awareness had taken hold. The next generation, George, Charlotte, and Louis would grow up not only knowing their place in the monarchy, but also knowing they had people who would fight for their dignity. That might just be the most important royal legacy of all. Because crowns can be passed down, but character is taught. And on that day, thanks to Princess Anne and Prince William, the lesson was clear. Love and respect will always come before protocol. And that, above all else, is what truly makes a family royal.